This is 2024's video game you've never heard of. Here's a joke for you, Dan, or people, if you put this in. Otherwise, it's just for you, Dan. This show is just like Whose Line Is It Anyway? Except it's always my line. So it's much worse. It's not a good joke. It's not an old-timer. I hate myself. Jessica, you're doing it again. You wasted 2 minutes of Dan's time again. Actually, this isn't a jokey matter. This is a fairly serious video. I don't like being serious, not big on sincerity. Like to make everything a joke. But the video game I'm talking about today is pretty serious. So I'm sure I'll work the jokes in somewhere. I hate myself. Hello, I'm Jess, the eponymous host of I'm Just Saying, and today I'm just saying that it's a weird time to be a fan of adventure games. A really weird time in the games industry, because even though the industry is making more money than ever, and there are more games out than there've ever been in any previous year of the history of time, the concept and genre of what exactly is an adventure game has never felt so nebulous. People use the term to refer to games that are action adventures, games that are story-based, point-and-click adventure games, choice-based adventure games, everything back from King's Quest all the way up to Dustborn. Adventure is puzzle games. Adventure is Legend of Zelda. Adventure can be combat or no combat. It's Assassin's Creed. It's Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. It's so many different things that I feel like the soul of what an adventure game used to be is kind of missing from the games industry right now, which is weird. It's not the point and click adventure games aren't coming out. It's just that they're hard to find in a genre that's awash with everybody using this term that just means so many different things to different people. There's nothing terribly wrong with that. It's like how people say role-playing game when they're talking about a game where you inhabit a particular role. It doesn't actually share the mechanics of what makes a role-playing game that you would see from FromSoft games or Elder Scrolls or anything like that. But despite the fact that the adventure title has gotten a little bit confusing, boy, are there still some very cool adventure games. And I think perhaps something that might link together what I think is one of the greatest things about adventure games, at least that I remember from when I was young, is feeling really smart. This is one of the reasons why I loved point-and-click adventure games. When I was growing up, that was The Longest Journey, Siberia, Still Life, which I played way too young. Lots of dead women. I was gonna say bodies, but they're women. It's like Jack the Ripper. So many dead people. Not appropriate. But anyway. Longest Journey is my favorite game of all time. And it's funny, I'm going back and playing a little bit of it now. Well, I'm watching a friend of mine play it because everybody knows the second best way of consuming your favorite media is forcing your friends to consume it for the first time in front of you. And that's what I've been doing. And just seeing a story told on that scale, it's so dense. In the high fantasy plus sci-fi elements, there's so many balls in the air. There's such deep lore. There's so many things that are going on. And that's something that adventure games can really unlock, is access to a linear, really effectively told story. I think now that we're in the age of that Telltale, Walking Dead surge of adventure games, but they were a different kind of adventure game. They're really these bite-sized adventure games built quite deliberately around decision-making and not so much how do you use a rubber ducky, a clamp, and a Band-Aid to get a key that is lost down an electrified subway rail. And that's why The Longest Journey is better than The Walking Dead. Anyway, I digress. We should have called this show I Digress. The second thing I think point-and-click adventure games were so incredible with in their heyday is, number one, telling really great stories, deliberate end-to-end stories. None of this branching paths. No branching paths. Does a book have branching paths? No. unless it's a choose your own adventure. They were good, but they shouldn't. But you wouldn't have a whole genre of adventure that is now dominated by choose your own adventure. That would be insane. No, we still like stories that are designed to be experienced the way that their creators want us to experience them. So I still love a linear story. And what's the second thing? The second thing, I undigress, that I think point and click adventure games of my youth, of the 90s and the 2000s, did impeccably well, which not too many games are doing now, is they give you a significant level of challenge, and then upon beating that challenge, you feel like a damn genius. And that is so good. You got all the narrative yummies of being fed all these incredible characters and this series of events and everything to get caught up in that's so narratively satisfying. And then all these little puzzles to solve along the way that make you just feel clever. Just feels super clever. And I think we've been starved of that a little bit in 2024. We have the great stories, but a lot of them aren't arriving in what I would say is the shoehorned adventure genre. A lot more of them are coming through in your traditional third-person action games like Last of Us, like Death Stranding. Yeah, I said it. What? Death Stranding. I didn't have to take a swing like that. I could have just gone with Uncharted 4. We're usually seeing these really good stories these days embedded in completely different genres, any kind of genre. It certainly isn't just the realm of the linear point and click adventure game anymore. And at the same time, difficulty seems to have been extracted from the adventure genre. And I think this is a massive shame because it was so good to play those games, to encounter Gabriel Knight's puzzle where you need to impersonate a man wearing a mustache. Actually, the man doesn't have a mustache, but what you do is trap a cat in a sticky tape. He runs past, the cat fur gets on the sticky tape, and then you tape that to your own face, and then because the guy you're impersonating doesn't have a mustache, you then have to draw a mustache on his passport. You would never do that in The Walking Dead. Life is Strange doesn't care about giving you some esoteric puzzle that doesn't make any sense. There's no monkey wrench that's an actual monkey. Those were great times. Okay, were they frustrating times? Yes. Also, because this was in the heyday of not being able to look things up. Yes, I'm that old. And boy, that made for a tough time. But that was part of the magic. It's like being stuck in Elden Ring. You don't want to just be able to walk over. That's the whole part of the game. A huge important part of what makes that game so satisfying is the challenge. A huge part of what made adventure games so satisfying was the story, and then part and parcel the challenge of actually coming up against all kinds of puzzles, dialogue puzzles. You got Monkey Island's word sword fighting. I'm saying that wrong. It's got a different name. And all these bits and pieces. It's what embedded you in it because you spent more time in it, because you couldn't just knock it over in 2 hours like you can one of the episodes of pick any Telltale game. It doesn't make the Telltale adventures bad. It's just kind of a shame that we've lost those old school experiences. Now, I don't want to say there are no companies still doing it. Wadget Eye are an indie outfit that has released fantastic point-and-click adventure games that have a really strong stories, really strong characters, and really strong puzzle elements. But I do want to talk to you about one specific game, and I'm sorry for making you wait so long to hear what game it is because I blabbed. But this is a game that came out this year that will make you feel like the smartest person in the whole of your house, maybe your city. I don't know where you live. And that is Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. This is such a beautiful little gem that It's exactly what you would have hoped a person way back in the renaissance of point-and-click adventure games back in the early 2000s would have done had they the resources and the technological capabilities and graphical capabilities of making a game with all of the design tidbits in mind back then today. It is so narratively fascinating. It does a really good job of throwing you right into the middle of everything and then having absolute trust in you that you will figure it out. It has all different puzzles that come in basically every form you can imagine. There's environmental puzzles. There's a whole book of what is essentially logic puzzles. You don't have to do all of them, but you can use them to unlock shortcuts as you're walking around this house trying to figure out who lives there, what's going on, what's happening with this old woman who just is lying motionless upstairs. The mystery is what sort of primes you from the beginning, and in fact, you don't even know who you are. But all of these things unfold as you figure out little bits and pieces, and you'll be doing so many things that at a first glimpse seem impossible. There's a moment where you walk into a particular room and there's two mannequins. The way that you can manipulate each mannequin, and I should be clear, this isn't a pixel hunting game by any means. Everything that you want to access is accessible as if you were playing it on a console. It just prompts you right at the bottom, this is the thing, and then you know if you can interact with it or not. So it's not as much finagling as those 90s games, Monkey Island and stuff like that. But at the same time, there's instances like this mannequin puzzle where the only way you can manipulate each of these is to tap on their head and then they turn left, or tap on their head and then they turn right. And it's one of these moments where you're like, this means nothing to me. I have absolutely no idea. And to be clear, this is a house that is stacked to the brim of things you'll come across saying that's a puzzle, things you'll come across that are tidbits in the lore, and you try and file everything away because you know everything is going to be of use at some point. You just don't exactly know when. Now, luckily, because this is a 2024 adventure game, it's got lots of like little nice quality of life improvements that you probably would have hoped would have been back in the 90s games, but they just didn't either think of it at the time or the UI just didn't allow for it. But now it's like you've got all this evidence, all these memories. So every time you come across something, it goes into a log that you can access at any point, whenever you want. And the deal with these mannequins is you start to move them and you're like, well, how on earth am I supposed to know what I'm supposed to do with these? Like, they move around. Okay, I've got so much information already on a bunch of names and things that have gone on and mysterious things. And it's this very weird, bizarre auteur and his films, and he's a recluse. You know so many bits and pieces, but none of it seems to connect to that. And then an hour later, you hit something where you get a videotape and you load in this videotape, and it's a bizarre video, and it's just a woman and a man, and they're sort of just like looking. And if you just have it filed away in the back of your head, the mannequin puzzle, you're like, oh my God, they're looking left and right. This is what the mannequins do. They look left and right. You have something like that, and you're like, yes, I get it. You have these incredibly difficult puzzle boxes that seem to be connected to these certain rooms, and every one of them has its own kind of complex puzzle that challenges you to look at things in a different perspective. Every single one has you straining just the absolute outer limits of how your brain can think laterally. This is one of those games that makes your brain hurt, and you will feel like an idiot, and then you'll feel like an absolute genius, and then probably feel like an idiot again. But I think my favorite part of the game, and I have to say all this without giving anything away because I really want you to play it, and the story's really worth uncovering for yourself, and so are the puzzles, so I won't give you any solutions. But just to vaguely talk about why I think this is so fantastic. Apart from the design, these really bright pinks and blacks. It's got some genuinely successful horror moments that are actually quite terrifying, and they're pulled off really well. The way that the story slowly unfolds entirely by what you learn, it doesn't tell you anything. You glean everything. This is a game that has the ultimate trust that you will work it out. A Elden Ring level of trust that you will work it out. But this time we're talking about a puzzle adventure game. In fact, it has so much trust that in what is probably my favorite part of the game, at the very end, and again, to be clear, you could even argue it leaves things unsaid, or it leaves things up to your interpretation. But in fact, there is a series of events. There is an intended linear story to be discovered here, but it won't tell you exactly what that is. In fact, at the very end of the game, some of the documents you pick up have redacted names. The game isn't going to tell you, and it never tells you. But then at the very end, you have a conversation with somebody who tells you, you'll have to go answer all of these questions. But don't worry, you'll know the answer. And it is a beautiful moment where, because of the game's complexity, you have had to intimately align yourself with all of the events so far. You've had to make assumptions about what has gone on here. What are the relationships? You have such an intimate knowledge over the years of 1867, all the way up to 2014 of the key points, what happened, what art was produced, which of these artists connects to who and why, and what did they believe, and then what happened in people's artistry and what actually happened in the real world. And you spend the entire game familiarizing yourself to the nth degree, down to being able to almost recite the words of every document you've picked up, be able to see in your mind's eye each piece of art that you've seen, each relevant anything, note, phone number. And you arrive at this point, and when someone tells you, don't worry, you'll know the answer, there's this feeling like, oh wait, I can't look it up? What do you mean? I don't have enough information. And you start doing it, and you realize you do know, because you've spent the last 15, if you're not as slow as me, or 25 if you took a little longer in the puzzles and got stuck for 5 hours. You hit these points where, well, I actually think that this happened. I think this person died. This person did this terrible thing. This was what that piece of art was talking about. And you have to just type out the answers to these questions. And then they turn out to be right. And it's like you are just so embedded in that narrative. You are embodying the protagonist who is answering these questions after having explored these memories. And it's not just them that have explored the memories and recovered them, it's you. You're absolutely coded in everything that this game wanted to teach you and wanted to tell you. There's no better way to experience a story than in an adventure game. And this may be controversial, but I think that there's no better way to experience a story than in a game that has an element of difficulty. I think it is just as successful in a game like The Last of Us, where the difficulty in the combat is reflected in the character's struggle. You're both feeling the same thing, which is just under the thumb trying to survive. And I think the reason a traditional adventure game, and the way that I'm talking about it here without combat and stuff, is more successful with difficulty is because you belong to the world for longer. You're going to know more about The Longest Journey because it's got the freaking rubber ducky puzzle, and you're going to remember Gabriel Knight because of its dumb mustache puzzle. You're going to remember Lorelei because it has a computer in the basement that asks you to fill out 3 different sets of runes, at no point saying if you got them right or wrong. And then you have to flip a bunch of dials based on puzzles that you've seen throughout the entire game to allocate a bunch of different dates to other dates. And when you pull that off, It is just something else. I feel like I took a degree in this game, which is probably why I'm now bringing it to work to tell you about it. But it's just so infinitely special, and it's really exciting to see that people are still making a game like this. The Simogo made this game, and it's published by Annapurna, who do a lot of really cool things. You might know Simogo because they did Year Walk and Sayonara Wild Hearts, but the music of this game is lovely. The whole vibe is lovely. It's frustrating in the same way that any game with difficulty is frustrating, because the whole point of challenge is that you won't always be able to pull it off. But when you do, boy, you do. And I really think you should play this game, because if you have any interest in puzzles or really good stories or adventure, and you're wondering where the slam dunks in that genre are, especially in 2024, then this is where they are. And the reason why we've titled this as a game you've never heard of is, well, okay, I brought it up like a couple of videos ago, but genuinely, this is a game that has an overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam, but only like 900 user reviews. Like it flew right under the radar when it came out in May. So you got a real treat there if you're looking for it. And personally, this was actually also the first adventure game of this ilk, and I don't really include Walking Dead and Life is Strange because there's no challenge. You're really just playing through making a bunch of decisions, which is fine, but it's not the kind of point-and-click adventure game that I'm really talking about. In the kind I'm talking about, I think this is the first one in recent memory where I didn't look up any hints. I didn't want to know, in the same way that when I played Elden Ring, I didn't want to know. I didn't want any backseating. I didn't want any help. I just wanted to work it out myself. And it was so satisfying to do that. It was nice to just be stuck for 5 hours. It wasn't nice. It was terrible. But it was really cool to just sit with that. And then I did ask my old colleague from GameSpot at one point. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? Hey, honey. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? I have no idea what to do with any of these. And he just said, piano. And I was like, I didn't know there was a puzzle there. And I checked it out and I was still stuck, and then had my dad over and we both looked at it for a while. And then it sort of like organically worked that out. And then it was like a crack in the case. And then because I'd spent that 5 hours intimately familiarizing myself with every single little clue that I picked up so far and every little bit of lore about the world, knowing that there were a bunch of puzzles and pieces I knew about those puzzles and puzzles that didn't seem to have any solutions at all, or solutions that I couldn't connect to answers, I was at a point where everything just unraveled. After I hit that point, which wasn't particularly difficult, I just wasn't sure where to look, then I just knew everything, and everything fell into place, and I felt so smart. And I want you to feel smart. So if you want to feel smart, then check this game out. And if you need help, you can ask me, and I'll give you the most basic of hints. And then they won't even be hints. I'll just say piano, and we'll work it out together. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I hope you enjoy this game, and I hope that you're excited to hear about it if it sounds like something you'd be interested in and you didn't even know it existed. If you did know it existed, then I'm sorry for assuming that you wouldn't, but that's okay. That you're just ahead of the game. You should have told me about it earlier. It's okay. I forgive you. We'll get past this. I think we can come back stronger. Okay, bye.